All right, tell you what, I'm going to kick off. All right, so I've got my fidget ball with me too. So if you see me, just every now and then you might see it in the screen. All right, so we'll get started. Just a little bit of admin. All these sessions will be recorded, just to make everybody aware of that. All the sessions we are running to are going to be run with a neuro-inclusive lens, which means we try and make it friendly for every brain. So you can have your cameras on or off, up to you. Engage in a way that's comfortable for you. Throw questions in a chat, put up your electronic hand, whatever you'd like to do. We won't put you on the spot. We're not going to throw in an unexpected group activity and expect everyone to perform. Do not worry. Our slides are also designed to be neuro-inclusive, so different colours and fonts, etc., to make it a bit easier for all individuals to read. You'll see a mix of Adam and my branding, because we're just kind of working together on this one, and just, we've just kind of thrown our content together and practiced it and all that kind of stuff. But we haven't gone to the trouble of rebranding ourselves as anything, so it's just, that's what you're going to see. We'll be offering practical advice, not legal advice. So I just wanted to make that clear, that clearly we're not experts, but we have a big passion for this subject, especially around psychological safety and the new regulations. And so we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can. I'm just going to start off, by quickly introducing myself, and I'll hand it over to Adam to introduce himself. So my name's Amanda. I'm founder and lead consultant of Thriving with Neurodiversity. I'm an ADHD coach, and I run workshops on neuroinclusion in the workspace, which have a strong psychological safety theme through them. My background is 20 plus years in change and communications. I've done a postgraduate in positive psychology at Melbourne Uni, and I am a massive fan of strengths theory and approaching things through a strengths lens rather than the negative narrative that can form opinions and thoughts about different neurotypes, different brains. So there will be elements of neurodiversity through this, and a focus on neuroinclusion, but the key topics will be psychological safety and people leaders. So now I'll pass over to Adam.
Thank you very much. As I just made a mess of my screen.
All right.
So
introduce yourself while you're fixing it all.
Yeah, that's right. I'm Adam. Adam Becker. I'm 30 years in technology, actually, and I'm a bit of a weird technologist because the thing I care about the most is people, and I also have a postgrad qualification in psychology, and I run a consultancy called People First Leaders that offer kind of team investigation and reset coaching if a team is a bit stuck. Psychological safety could be an area that needs improvement that I could come in and help with. Also offer kind of one-on-one leadership coaching and group coaching for leaders who want to accelerate. Maybe they're new leaders and they haven't been adequately trained for what they're doing, or just looking to expand their skill set. We offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching for that as well. But quite passionate about psychological safety, and yeah, as I said, just people and teams, really, more so than technology. So that's why I stopped leading. I've led teams for years and years and years, and I've founded this consultancy, and I'm doing this full time.
Yep, awesome. Okay, so we're going to kick off with some key definitions. So I'll hand it over to you, Adam, for the first one.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, look, starting with the foundation. So if you're not aware, Amy Edmondson, who is a professor at Harvard Business School, actually coined the phrase psychological safety. And it was after, I'll explain in a later slide in some more detail, but it was after some study that she was doing with healthcare teams in the US. And I think she's kind of defined it a couple of different ways. And if you look online, you can find them, but I think this one sums it up the best. And it's a belief that you won't be punished or humiliated if you speak up with an idea or with a question, or with a concern, or admit to a mistake. And kind of the three key points that kind of support that is, being willing to be vulnerable with colleagues. So if the environment generates that vulnerability, then it's a safe environment. But it's having this safety is foundation for innovation. You can't experiment if you're afraid, and because experiments fail sometimes. And third, it's a team level thing. It can't just be you, or it can't just be your colleague. It actually needs to be your leader or you as the leader and the team that have that sense of safety. And it's not about being nice. It's about creating conditions where people can do their best work.
And just to reiterate, if you want to throw some questions in the chat at any stage, Adam and I will kind of both be watching it. If you're at last week's session, this is a little bit of a repeat, but because of the way that I work, I'm constantly changing my messages, etc. So you'll probably learn something new. So this is just a very quick snapshot of the new regulations, and the purpose of today is to raise awareness of them. So the new regulations which came into effect in Victoria, or will, on the 1st of December, will be focusing on psychosocial hazards and reducing the impact of those. So basically, a psychosocial hazard is something that can impact your mental health. And the process is to establish, mitigate psychosocial hazards in the same process used for physical safety. So work health and safety regulations now include psychological as well as physical health. They've been deliberately built and launched so the same frameworks can be used. The whole idea is to identify proactively, and that's a very, very key word here, proactively identify risks, assess them, and then mitigate or remove them with controls. The very interesting point around controls, especially in Victoria, is that the primary control is work design. What can we do to change the design of work to reduce the psychosocial risk? Training and communications are lower controls, and they cannot be the only controls. So you can't now just train your way out of something. It's all about work design and work control. So the key difference between psychosocial and physical is that psychosocial arises from work design, social dynamics, culture, rather than the tangible equipment or substances that your physical comes from. If you are interested in more information or rolling this out in your organisation or your company, WorkSafe Victoria or your state's equivalent and Safe Work Australia have an amazing amount of information, templates, take you through the entire process. You cannot get it wrong if you use their resources. Okay, so why now? Right, so in December 2018, the federal government requested the Boland Review, which was to look at Australia's work health and safety framework. They'd recently rolled out new frameworks. They wanted to see if they were working, fit for purpose, etc. During this, they identified that there was quite a few gaps when it came to mental health and psychosocial hazards, etc. So that was kind of identified there. And then stats started to come in around 21, 22 from 2017, 2018 about workers' comp claims for mental health and how much they were rising. Now, if you have somebody out of work on a mental health claim compared to a physical claim, mental health claim, basically a person will be out for a lot longer. It will cost the business a lot more money, and there's less likelihood that person will return. So this is why it's another kind of key focus. So from October 2022, all of the states and jurisdictions in Australia started to introduce these new psychosocial hazards and risk registers, etc., aligned to the work health and safety framework and aligned to Safe Australia. Victoria's come in last, and theirs are the most stringent in the country. So how am I going for pace? Everyone okay?
Yeah, I think okay.
Excuse me. I do want to go a bit quicker, but I'm trying not to go too quick. So just let us know. Okay, so this is where the neuro inclusion bit comes in, and we're only going to touch on it briefly today because we've only got 45 minutes. But basically, the key thing around the it's such a tongue tie. Psychosocial regulations, as I just said, the new law treats mental health the same as physical health. Leaders must create psychologically safe workplaces and manage risks, and they must create work that is psychologically safe and does not cause mental health harm. Leaders must consult with employees during this process And if you're a national employer, the recommendation is you need to meet Victoria's higher benchmark from the 1st of December, but then have caveats for your other states if need be, because there are slight differences in some of the states. So that's the compliance side of it, right? So if you follow that, if you go to WorkSafe, you tick the box on compliance and you're all good. It's but if you want to turn compliance into culture and move beyond tick the box, as Natalie alluded to just before, one way of doing it, and probably one of the best ways of doing it, is applying a neuro-inclusive lens. Now, neuro-inclusive lens, if you use the terminology, looks at different brain types like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, etc., as a difference, not a deficit, and that there are strengths in these differences. So neuro-inclusion, you design work to recognize and support all brains and communication, so all employees can thrive, just not cope. Global studies show organizations advancing neuro-inclusion report stronger innovation, better use of AI, higher transformational readiness. Benefits are compound when paired with psychological safe ways of working. Neuro-inclusion also leads to increased trust, and having that lens over your proactive risk assessment means you have much broader scope as well. Because just because you haven't identified a risk doesn't mean you won't get in trouble for it, so to speak. I could do a whole training session on this. I do, but not today. So I'm just going to go one more slide on neurodiversity. So neurodivergent employees are just one of the minority groups highlighted as more susceptible to psychosocial hazards. So other groups are apprentices, young apprentices and tradies, older workers, smaller ethnic groups, those with English as a second language, etc. But the difference with the neuro-inclusion lens is someone with ADHD can belong to all of the other different minority and employee groups. So it covers everybody. So if you focus on a neuro-inclusive lens, then you make it more inclusive for everybody. So, and just a quick view of the numbers, which is another reason why it's worth looking at too, because I'll let you read the numbers there, but overall, 1 in 5 are neurodivergent, and I do have references, sources for all of these. Dyslexia is the big one with 1 in 10, but also the one where it's the most underdiagnosed. So this just gives you an indication of some of the different brain types, and I will now pass over to Adam to continue talking about psychological safety and leadership.
Awesome.
I will start to look at the chat. Okay, if you've just joined, throw any questions in the chat for us and we'll...
Yeah, for sure.
Have a go.
Thanks, Amanda. So a social scientist by the name of Tim Clark, who's the CEO of a leadership consultancy called Leader Factor in the US. He wrote a book called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, and these are the stages here. And the first one, which ties in pretty neatly with what Amanda was just talking about, is inclusion safety. So people feel accepted for who they are, and this is basic belonging in terms of your feeling safe in the team you're in the organization you're in. And these different stages, they stack. So Tim would say you can't have, for example, challenger safety if you haven't gone through in your team and created the other levels of safety. So the second level is learner safety. It's safe to ask questions and to experiment and maybe fail without judgment. The third is contributor safety. So people can use their skills to make meaningful contributions. You feel like you're a part of things and what you do is important. And then the fourth is you feel safe to challenge the status quo and maybe sometimes to speak truth to power. Yeah, so I think like a reflection maybe now or when you walk away from today in terms of these stages, where's your team at? And what's the next thing that you need to build on in terms of building psych safety in your team? And then I've come up, so kind of, as I said, I'm a bit passionate about this. So looking at Amy Edmondson's work and looking at Tim Clark's work, which are kind of, they're the two kind of main sources on psych safety. I've come up with this idea of there are 4 gaps that you can identify in your team. And I've created a diagnostic that you can use that we'll freely share with attendees after the session. That actually erodes safety. So the first is the voice gap. People don't feel heard. And the second is the trust gap, which is, as I said, I've been in technology leadership for 20 years and technology total for 30 years. Mistakes are punished, not learned from. And I've seen a lot of that over my career. The connection gaps, so leaders prioritize tasks over relationships. I could kind of, as Amanda said, you could do a whole session on neurodivergence. I could do a whole session on, leadership and relationship with your team. And the fourth one is the clarity gap, which is another one that I see regularly. So ambiguity, it breeds anxiety for people. So,
Mm.
clarity in terms of what's expected from their work, but also whether it's safe to say what they think or say what they mean. Just leaves them a bit uncertain and hesitant, as it says on the slide.
I've been a contractor for over 20 years and worked in many different industries and many different stakeholder groups, and I think I've seen all of these
All
so
these gaps.
often. These
Yeah,
these examples, they're just, it's quite prevalent.
yeah,
All right, so okay, Adam's got an awesome case study next,
yeah.
and just before he dives into that, in a couple of slides, I'll be looking at the roles and responsibilities, so breaking it down by where the onus lies on these psychosocial hazard regulations, and I'll be applying it to the NASA
Oh, good. Yeah.
example. So, sorry, Adam, over to you.
No, well, good. So you might know about this. This happened a while ago, but it's certainly one of the worst examples of what happens when psych safety is not thought about, when psych safety erodes, and unfortunately, in this particular example, people died. So there was a shuttle launch that was scheduled and happened in 1986. 73 seconds after launch, the shuttle exploded. Um, Prior to launch, there were some engineers that were concerned about O-rings, which I know nothing about because I'm not a shuttle engineer, but they were concerned that the O-rings were likely to fail if the temperature outside the rocket was particularly cold. And looking at the weather, they could see that it was going to be particularly cold, and so they raised these concerns with their leaders. But unfortunately, what we know now is that the hierarchical structure at NASA pushed back on that, and there was pressure to launch the shuttle, and the engineers were overruled. And so they tried to speak up, but it wasn't a culture where they were going to be listened to, and they were ignored. And the shuttle took off, and it exploded, and 7 people lost their lives as a result. So, kind of a lesson I've got there. If people are afraid to speak up, or if they're ignored, catastrophic failures aren't just possible, but they could be inevitable. Particularly environments where you're dealing with equipment that could be dangerous.
I listened to a podcast on this one, and it was just fascinating, just the dynamics and there's so many opportunities to make it right, and just how tiny the O-ring was, and or the
Yeah, oh,
O-rings
it's so
are
small in the whole. Yeah,
to
absolutely.
lead to such a catastrophic failure. Yeah, sorry, keep going now.
No, you're right. You're right. So, what does kind of good look like at a very high level? I think there's kind of some outcomes that I've listed there, right? So engagement increases, people feel more engaged in their workplace and in the work that they're doing in their team. Creativity increases, people feel like they belong, and there's a decrease in burnout. So people are generally just happier and less stressed in their work. And then off the back of that, support grows for people and their ideas. Team members feel more comfortable asking for help, offering assistance to colleagues. Ideas flow, creativity, as I said, increases, and communication is more transparent. And honest dialogue about what's actually going on starts to surface in the team.
There's so much research to support all of this.
Yes.
It could be just an age thing with me now, but I'm still so surprised when businesses just don't do it. It's not hard to implement this stuff.
No, I
Anyway,
think
I'll get off my soapbox.
no, you're right. I mean, I think, a catchphrase that I often use when I'm speaking or with clients is people over process is how things should be. But
Mm,
so often
yeah,
organizations just focus on process and forget the people element. Um, so here's another case study where things are more positive, and it's the work that Amy Edmondson did in the healthcare industry in the US, and she published it in Administrative Science Quarterly. If you're very interested, and this is where psych safety, the idea of it originated. So when Amy did this research, um, she initially expected that better performing teams in hospitals would report fewer mistakes and fewer errors. But the data actually showed the opposite. It showed that high performing teams reported more errors, actually significantly more than lower performing teams. And this seemed really strange because the question she started to ask and the people working with her started to ask was, were the best teams actually making more mistakes? That doesn't really compute. And that's not what it was. It's that they were being honest because the people in those teams felt psychologically safe. They admitted errors and they raised concerns without fear of punishment or retribution. The teams with low psychological safety, who were actually lower performing, they had mistakes too. They just hid them. They just weren't surfacing them,
mm,
being honest about them. So it was actually the transparency in the high performing teams
yeah,
that meant that the mistakes were seen. So as Edmondson says, better teams don't make fewer mistakes; they just surface them faster, uh,
yeah.
so that they can be resolved.
Before we move on to the next slide, I just want to get a snapshot of those, the few of you in the call today. Um, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you know about, and if you're not from Australia, apologies, but I'd still like to know because I know that Toronto's and Canada's done some quite a good bit of good work around psych safety. Um, but if you, bleh, start that again. How much do you know about the new psychosocial regulations on a scale of 1 to 5? 1, this is the first you're hearing about it. 5, you've had training and comms at work, you're all across it. So if you could just drop into the chat where you are in regards to your level of knowledge. 3, all right, thanks, Natalie. Julian, 2. Now, Julianne, quick question, and you can just put in the chat. You don't need to, I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you work for yourself? Do you work for a company? And Dion, same with you, just to see, because if you're a sole trader or you work for yourself, then you might not have as much. Um, might not. I work for an. Okay. And Queensland's new regulations have been in for a lot longer than Victoria's. So interesting. Okay, thank you. All right. I
I
will.
would look. I'd put just speaking fairly off the cuff and anecdotally, I would not be surprised if there are a lot of organisations in Victoria that don't
Mm,
know that this is coming.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, no, just yeah. I shake my head. All right, I'll move on to the next slide now.
Okay.
There we
Okay.
go.
So this is the stats slide, if you like. So the data for focusing on psychological safety and the outcomes that teams get and organizations get as a result, I think it's really compelling. So according to um, Gallup's research in 2017, teams with high psych safety show 76% more engagement with their work compared to teams with low psychological safety. The same study found 50% higher productivity in those teams, and they also found a 27% reduction in employee turnover. So retention much better when there's psychological safety. And some more recent research in journals that I have all the references for um, show that innovation and development cycles actually shorten by about 30% when teams feel safe to experiment, take intelligent risks, maybe fail, but be deliberate about that. We're going to experiment with this. We have a hypothesis. We'll see how it goes, and we'll learn from that, and that will inform what we do next. And look, in organisations I've worked in that are software engineering, and they make software products, and you might have heard of the kind of the agile methodology, they deliberately do those little experiments, very short, they call it time boxing, to learn very quickly and make decisions as they go about what they're building. And
I just want to, oh, sorry,
I
you're
was
still
just going
going.
to say, and so the last thing, so
Sorry.
great places to work is something that's pretty popular and has a lot of publicity these days. So you've probably heard of that, but they indicate that companies with safety focused cultures are 3 times more likely to be on their list. So yeah, this psych safety thing it's actually directly tied to business outcomes.
Yeah. And just adding a neuro-inclusive lens to this one. So companies where they advocate for and have implemented neuro-inclusion, so that the acceptance of all different brain types and the way and acceptance and acceptance is the wrong word, but it's the one I've got right now, of brains that think, process, and interpret the world differently to the majority. Also have the higher engagement, high productivity, definitely decreased turnover, because if somebody who is neurodivergent, and especially I have a few autistic colleagues who, if they can find a workplace where they can thrive and where they feel valued, they will stay for life, because there's so many other organizations do not treat them well, or just don't understand, I should say. Increased innovation, it's a strength of a lot of different neurotypes as well, so you'll see an even bigger increase in that. And this is where psychological safety and neuroinclusion go together, because a lot of the hazards that neurodivergent people face, low job control, inflexibility, bullying, poor communications, etc., are the hazards that your new psychosocial approach needs to mitigate. So there's a lot of alignment between the two areas. All right, so okay. A little bit of a busy slide, apologies. But so if we apply Victoria's new regulations to the NASA Challenger disaster, this is what could come out of it. So across the top are the roles as defined by the new code and the WorkSafe regulations. So you have the employer or / organizer. Now PCBU, they throw that acronym all the time, but I very rarely see it spelled out. So I'm not exactly sure. So I'm not going to try and guess that one for you. So the employer and organization ultimately has the responsibility. So they must ensure there are safe systems and processes in place, that psychological safety is weaved through everything. They must proactively identify the hazards and then assess and mitigate, and collaborate with and use employee expertise without pressure or fear of reprimand, etc. There's a key word around this, which is any controls / mitigations, so far as reasonably practical. And it's the cornerstone of this framework. So for a senior leader, it means that a passive or reactive approach is insufficient. Must be a proactive approach, just like we take to physical safety. It must be proactive. So the duty holder is legally required to actively seek out, assess, and control psychosocial hazards to the best of their ability. And all of this as well is require the consideration of how multiple hazards can combine to amplify risk. So high job demands with heat or shift work, not just single point hazards. So there's quite a lot behind the scenes. So NASA, in this example, NASA and the main contractor, Morton Thiokol, do I have it right, would face criminal charges and multi-million-dollar fines. Officers and senior leaders, and that's your board, your execs, public officers, their responsibility is a due diligence one. So they need to ensure the organisation is complying with the work health and safety framework around obligations and psychosocial risks. They must make sure resources are available, communication is clear, and that everybody is aware of it. In this case, they would have received large fines, and category 1, which is death or serious injury, can take you can get up to 20 years prison. So these are the Victoria's penalties as such. Managers that were directly involved, and in this instance, the managers told the engineers and the experts to change their feedback, stop talking about the negative, we're just going to go ahead. So there's no consulting with employees, that there was pressure to reverse decisions and escape ignoring critical safety concerns. So from this perspective, the individual would have received whatever internal repercussions there are for work health and safety issues, but also could have a part in that category one, 20 years in prison. And not in focus are the engineers and staff who raised the concerns, and any volunteers or junior staff who weren't part of the process. So it is quite far-reaching and far-ranging, the penalties. Something definitely to raise awareness of. Okay. I only have a couple more slides left, so if you do have any questions, please let us know. This is yours, Adam.
This is me. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. So sorry, I just thrown by the branding. Research shows that leadership and the way that you lead, if you're a leader, explains 70% variance in someone's engagement in their team or in their work and in your team. So leaders play a critical part in everything, but very critical part in how people are engaged, and certainly a critical part in safety and psych safety in the team. So how do we build it? There's four, my point of view, there's four core levers that you can pull as a leader, and things that you can start to think about and do to make your team more psychologically safe. One is to demonstrate empathy. So ask questions, listen actively. Don't just wait for your turn to talk. Actually hear what people are saying, and ask questions like, what am I missing? Or what concerns you about this work or this plan? Kind of ask open questions and give people the opportunity to speak up. Make it feel like it's safe for them to speak. Fallibility, modeling vulnerability is a huge one, and it's difficult for a lot of people, but admitting when you don't know something is really powerful. It allows people to feel like it's okay if they don't know something as well. And you can go and find out, or together you can go and find out what the answer is. When mistakes happen, kind of asking, well, what can we learn from that, instead of who's to blame, which is often, in my experience, where leaders jump to, because someone's asking them what went wrong and who can we blame. And make heroes of your people who surface problems early. I really kind of call them out and make it a thing in your team that we want to know. Just like those high-performing teams in the hospitals in America, report your mistakes, be public about them, and be honest about them. But demonstrate that you learn from them, and that things improve because you're honest about them and you take them seriously. Protection's a big one, so closing the connection gap that I mentioned earlier. Shielding your team from organizational noise and conflicting priorities is really important, just generally in terms of leading a team, in my opinion. But it helps create safety for them because they can focus on their work when they know they're not going to be distracted by an executive tapping them on the shoulder and saying, I want you to focus on this thing. They can actually do the thing that you've asked them to do, that the team's decided is the right next thing. And it also creates breathing room for innovation if they know that you've got their back. And clarity with autonomy, closing the clarity gap. So defining the what really clearly, so being very clear about outcomes and what it is that you expect a person or the team to achieve, but give them autonomy, let them own the how. Don't be prescriptive about the way they do the work. I've said there, provide context, not control, and share the why behind decisions. Bring them in to the tent.
Sorry, you're gonna have to bear with me for 1 minute. I've got a dog barking at my door and it's all I can hear. So just going to mute myself and run off.
Can you go to the next slide though? No, you can't. Okay. Yeah, bring them into the tent when you can and share what's going on. Thank you. And just some suggestions of things that you could put into place immediately. So you could start meetings with learning questions like, what did we discover this week? And just kind of shows that you are continuously curious about what's going on and what people have learned, and you're not just jumping into the things that you need to do next. Um, Acknowledge your own uncertainty. It kind of relates to the vulnerability that I mentioned a second ago, or the fallibility, but just demonstrate that vulnerability. I might be wrong about this thing that I think, and kind of start with that position and normalize that not having all the answers is fine, and it's just part of individual growth. Responding to bad news with curiosity. Again, as I said, not blaming. Replace anger or disappointment with genuine questions to help people feel like they can be transparent. Debriefing mistakes without blame. So, what can we learn from this? Not who did what, but what can we learn? Hold a really structured discussion focused around improvements rather than who is at fault. Giving public credit for candor, as I said a second ago. So, just be really public. If someone raises a concern, you might not like it, and it could be something that challenges a decision that you've made, or you feel like it personally challenges you. But if you can be the bigger person and just swallow that for a second and acknowledge, thanks for raising that concern. It's really good that we have an environment where if you think something's not right, you can speak up, and find a way to take the climate of the team. And there's lots of ways that you can do that. If you might be familiar with engagement surveys, Culture Amp, an Australian startup, pretty global now, and they're used pretty broadly. I've used another one called Lattice, I think. So there's ways that you can put surveys together that are not so confronting, and people can be a bit anonymous. But if you feel like you have the relationship, you can say to people, how safe do you feel speaking up? And just kind of get a feel for where they're at.
We have one slide left and 2 minutes, so I think we've done pretty well. I'll go through that quickly. Just wanted a special call out to Manjeet, who's putting all of these awesome links into the chat. So thank you. It's you're going to save me time later, because after this session we do share a short overview with any of the Q&A, but the key links and the key points, and I'll make sure I include all of those. So awesome job. Okay, last slide. All right. So this is just a quick overview of how to successfully implement the new regulations. Put someone in charge. This is a massive rollout project implementation, and it needs to have a sponsor and someone in charge. Train your leaders and employees. Give them the skills and the confidence to be able to manage this properly and do their best by their team members. Clear on roles. Make it part of everyday work. Just like I recently had a contract at a heavy maintenance mechanical paper mill where physical health and safety was just massive and you couldn't ignore it, right? It's the same approach we've got to take to psychological safety. Make it part of everyday work. Teach your managers, make adjustments easy. Make sure you include a diverse group of employees when you consult, and you have to consult as part of this process. So make sure you have a diverse group, different backgrounds, different ages, different roles, different locations, everything. So because the more diversity you have in your consulting group, the more proactive hazards you will find to be able to mitigate. And prepare for stringent reporting. The regulations have only been out for a year or two at the most in some areas, so there's little information yet about their success, etc. But there's more and more coming through from regulators in regards to heavy fines and workplaces that aren't doing the right thing, especially around large organisational change management. So just do your work. Just do your own due diligence. Okay, so we're going to wrap up because we are going to finish on time. It's 12:45. Thank you all for turning up and just, listening, and let us know if you have any questions. If you are like me, you process things and you might have a question afterwards. The little pack that I will send out will have Adam and my contact details. Reach out anytime for a chat or a question. And next week we have psychological safety and organizational change management, which is now considered a new psychosocial hazard. So if you're interested, come along. But
Is it really?
thank you, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to have the chance to speak to you. And yeah, I'd love to hear from anyone who wants to discuss anything any further.
All right. Thanks,